Well, right, the subtitle of my book, Return of the God Hypothesis, is 3 Discoveries That Reveal the Mind Behind the Universe. And I start, in a sense, building on the biological arguments that I made in the, actually the order is reversed in the new book, but here's the story of the book. I wrote 2 books beforehand, one, Signature in the Cell, and second, Darwin's Doubt. And these were books arguing that the information needed to build the first life and major new innovations in the history of life is best explained by the activity of a designing intelligence. In 1957, Francis Crick advanced something called the sequence hypothesis. This was 4 years after he and Watson had elucidated the structure of the DNA molecule. And in 57, Crick realized that the subunits along the interior of the molecule, along the spine of the molecule, subunits called the bases or nucleotide bases, were functioning like alphabetic characters in a written text or digital characters like the zeros and ones in a section of software. That is to say that it is not the material properties of those chemical subunits that give them their function. It's not their weight or their shape, but rather their arrangement in accord with an independent symbol convention now known as the genetic code. And so what Crick was able to elucidate with the help of other scientists in the ensuing 7 or 8 years was a whole information storage, transmission, and processing system, and that DNA was literally carrying instructions for directing the construction of the proteins and protein machines that cells need to stay alive. And so at the foundation of life, we don't just have matter and energy, we don't just have chemistry, we have code, we have information. And that raised the really huge question in biology: where does that information come from? And that question, scientists, because they could not answer that question within the framework of modern evolutionary theory, either chemical evolutionary theories of the origin of life, or I would have and have argued biological theories of the origin of the new information needed to build new forms of life, are also inadequate to account for the origin of the information needed to build new biological form. It takes, just as in our computer world, you need new information to generate a new program or operating system to give your computer a new function. In the biological world, you need information to generate new biological form. It takes information to create form. And so that has turned out to be a very, very difficult problem to solve within the framework of evolutionary biology. I argued in Signature in the Cell, my first book, that information in our uniform and repeated experience is always the product of an intelligent cause. And our uniform and repeated experience is the basis of all scientific reasoning. So there's actually a scientific basis for inferring that there was a designing intelligence responsible for the information necessary to life. Whenever we see information, whenever we detect it and we trace it back to its ultimate source, whether it's in a section of computer code or if it's in a hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book or even information embedded in a radio signal, whenever we look at that information, trace it back to where it came from, we always find a mind, not an undirected material process. So the discovery of information at the foundation of life in every single cell of every living organism, including the very first simple one-celled organisms, suggests that a designing intelligence played an important causal role in the origin and development of life. And that's the argument of the first 2 books. And that's what I pick up in the 3rd book. Because people then asked, well, who do you think that designing intelligence is or was?